While serving tea, the Duke heard his mother murmur, "Marry him before her." The wind howled through the ancient stone corridors, carrying the scent of salt and wet earth. Inside, the grand halls were silent, save for the soft clatter of silver and porcelain as servants prepared the morning tea. Lucian, the young Duke of Evermore, moved quietly among them. His movements were precise, almost ceremonial, yet there was a weight in his shoulders, an invisible burden that made even the simplest task feel heavy. He poured the tea into delicate cups, set the trays with care, and listened to the quiet hum of the castle. It was during one such morning ritual, as the candlelight flickered against the tall windows, that he heard it. "Marry him before her," murmured his mother. The words were soft, almost a whisper lost in the rustle of silk and the clinking of porcelain. But to Lucian they struck like a bell, clear and impossible to ignore. He froze, the tray in his hands trembling slightly. The Queen Dowager, his mother, was seated near the fire, her eyes distant, as though speaking to someone unseen. Lucian's heart thudded. Before her, before who? The question clawed at his mind. He set down the tray with careful hands and bowed slightly, though his mother did not seem to notice him. The castle had long been a place of whispers and secrets. Generations of the Evermore family had ruled from its halls, their power rooted in both human cunning and darker, older forces that none dared speak of aloud. Lucian had grown up aware of both, the weight of responsibility and the shadow of the supernatural. But he had never heard words like these before. After the tea was served, Lucian retreated to the library. The room smelled of old parchment and candle wax. He sat in a high-backed chair near the window, staring at the storm outside, the ocean thrashing against the cliffs like a living thing. He tried to focus on the scrolls before him, but his mind kept returning to his mother's words. Marry him before her. Who was the her? And why such urgency? A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Enter," he called. The door opened and a young servant stepped in, bowing. "Your Grace, a visitor waits in the hall. She says it is urgent." Lucian frowned. Visitors were rare at this hour, and rarer still someone who demanded attention. "Send her in," he said, trying to steady his voice. Moments later, a figure appeared in the doorway. A woman, tall and graceful, with hair as dark as midnight and eyes that seemed to carry both sorrow and defiance. Her presence was magnetic, drawing the attention of the room despite the storm outside. "Lucian," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I am Alara. I need to speak with you." He studied her carefully. There was something familiar in her eyes, something that made his heart tighten with unease and curiosity all at once. "You may speak," he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. Alara took the seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I know what your family carries," she said, almost in a whisper. "The curse." Lucian's brow furrowed. "I do not understand," he said cautiously. "What curse?" She leaned forward slightly. "The Evermore line, it has been bound for generations. The firstborn son is fated to marry a woman chosen by forces beyond the human eye. Refusal brings ruin. I have come to warn you." He felt a chill creep over him. He had heard of the old stories of supernatural contracts and ancestral burdens, but he had never believed them. Now, looking at Alara, he felt the cold grip of something he could neither fight nor ignore. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "And why now?" Alara's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "Because the choice is upon you. Soon, someone will be forced into a bond not of love but of fate. If you do not act, the consequences will be yours and theirs." The wind outside rattled the windows, and the castle seemed to shiver as if it shared his unease. Lucian felt a sudden longing to escape, to run from the weight of a destiny he did not understand. Yet he also felt drawn to Alara, as though her presence was a tether to something important, something necessary. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice tighter than he intended. "Because I have no reason to lie," she said simply, "and because the danger is real." If you ignore it, someone you care for may be lost, or worse. Lucian stood and began pacing the length of the library. His mind spun with questions, fear, and a growing sense of responsibility. The weight of his family's expectations pressed down on him, and the unknown threat of the curse hovered like a storm cloud over his head. "You speak of curses and choices," he said finally, stopping to face her. "Yet I do not even know who the her is that my mother spoke of." Alara's lips tightened, and she looked away for a moment, as though choosing her words carefully. "She is someone connected to both your past and your future," she said finally. "Someone whose fate is intertwined with yours, whether you wish it or not." Lucian's chest tightened. Every instinct told him that his mother's words were no ordinary advice. They were a warning, a prophecy, or perhaps both. And somewhere deep in his heart, he knew that Alara was telling the truth. He sank into the chair again, staring out at the storm. "Then I must know more," he said. "I cannot ignore this, whatever it is." Alara nodded. "Then I will help you, but you must be careful. The castle is full of eyes and ears, and not all are loyal. Some will seek to manipulate the curse for their own gain." Lucian swallowed hard. He had always known that his life was not entirely his own, but the thought of someone else controlling his destiny filled him with a cold dread. Yet, at the same time, he felt a spark of determination. He would not be a pawn. He would understand, and if possible, he would defy the forces that sought to bind him. As the afternoon faded into evening, the storm outside grew fiercer. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the cliffs and the roiling sea below. The sound of thunder echoed through the castle, shaking its ancient walls. Lucian and Alara sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, bound together by a shared understanding of danger and fate. Finally, Alara stood. "There is one thing you must do tonight," she said. "Go to the old chapel in the eastern wing. There you will find answers, but also tests. The choice you make there will shape everything." Lucian frowned. "Tests? Tests of courage, of heart, and of truth," Alara said. "The forces that bind your family are not cruel without reason. They demand understanding, sacrifice, and wisdom. You must be ready." The young duke nodded slowly. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, heavier than any armor he had ever worn. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of resolve began to grow. He would face whatever awaited him in the chapel. He would uncover the meaning of his mother's words, and he would protect those he loved, no matter the cost. As Alara departed, leaving the library in silence once more, Lucian remained by the window. The storm had not yet passed, and the sea continued its relentless assault on the cliffs. But for the first time that day, Lucian felt a strange sense of purpose. He did not yet know the full danger, nor the full cost of the path before him, but he knew he could not turn away. And then, as if the castle itself wished to mark the beginning of this journey, a soft thump echoed in the hall behind him. He turned, heart pounding, and saw a single blood-red rose lying on the floor, its petals fresh and vibrant despite the winter outside. On the rose was a single word, written in delicate, curling script: "Choose." Lucian's hand trembled as he picked it up. The storm outside roared in answer, as if urging him onward. He knew that the path before him would be perilous, filled with shadows, secrets, and tests of the heart. But he also knew that tonight his life, and the lives of those around him, would change forever. And somewhere deep in the castle, in the silent shadows, the Queen Dowager's eyes glinted with quiet triumph. She had set the pieces in motion. Now it was up to her son to play the game. Lucian held the rose tightly, feeling the weight of destiny pressing against his chest. He could almost hear the whisper again, carried on the wind through the ancient halls: "Marry him before her." And somewhere in the echo of that whisper, he knew that his journey had only just begun. The storm had passed, leaving the castle shrouded in a mist that clung to the stone walls and dampened the cobbled courtyards. Lucian could still hear the distant roar of the sea below, but inside the castle felt quieter, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. He clutched the blood-red rose tightly, its message heavy in his mind. Choose. He had not slept that night. The words of his mother and the warning of Alara had haunted him, twisting in his thoughts like a shadow he could not escape. He rose from his chamber and walked to the eastern wing, the hallway lined with statues of long-dead ancestors, their stone faces watching silently. The corridors seemed longer than usual, the flickering torches casting shadows that danced like living things. When he reached the old chapel, he paused at the heavy wooden doors. The iron hinges creaked as he pushed them open, revealing a room bathed in moonlight that streamed through the stained glass windows. Dust hung in the air, catching the silver light, and the scent of old incense lingered faintly. The chapel felt alive, not with people but with memory, a record of prayers, vows, and the secrets of generations. At the center of the chapel stood a simple altar, draped in dark velvet. On it lay a single golden locket, glinting in the moonlight. Lucian approached it cautiously, his pulse quickening. Something about the locket seemed familiar, though he could not place why. "Alara," he whispered, half expecting her to appear, "what is this?" A voice answered, soft and distant, echoing through the stone walls. "It is a test," she said. "The locket contains the truth of the curse. You must open it, but be ready for what you may see." Lucian hesitated. Fear and curiosity battled within him. Finally, with a deep breath, he picked up the locket. The metal was warm to his touch, as if it carried the heartbeat of someone long gone. He opened it. Inside was a small, folded parchment. Unfolding it, Lucian read the words aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "The firstborn son of Evermore must choose the bride before the witching hour, or the bloodline will fall to shadow. The choice is his alone, yet the heart must guide him, or despair will follow." A cold shiver ran down his spine. The curse was real. His mother's words had not been a simple warning, they were a command, a prophecy. And now the weight of it pressed upon him like a stone. He heard a movement behind him and turned quickly. Alara stepped from the shadows, her dark hair falling around her face. Her eyes were bright, almost fierce in the moonlight. "You see now," she said softly, "why you cannot ignore it." Lucian nodded, still holding the locket. "But how can I choose? How can I know what is right when I do not even know who the her is that my mother spoke of?" Alara took a step closer, her voice gentle. "The heart knows more than the mind. You must listen to it. The curse tests not just obedience but understanding and courage. You must be ready to face truths you may not like." He looked at her, trying to read her expression. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of warning and hope, that made his heart beat faster. He had never felt such a pull toward anyone before, not even toward the people he had been raised among. Something about Alara made the cold stone of the castle feel warmer, as though light could exist even in shadow. "What happens if I fail?" he asked, his voice low. "Then despair follows," she said simply. "But you are not meant to fail, not if you trust yourself." The chapel seemed to grow quieter, the moonlight brighter, as though the room itself waited for him to decide. Lucian knelt before the altar, holding the locket in his hands. He could feel the pulse of the curse, like a faint heartbeat beneath his fingers. Somewhere deep inside he felt a spark of determination. He would not let fear rule him. "Alara," he said, standing, "I will face it. I will uncover the truth no matter the cost." She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Good, then we begin." The test took them through the castle, though not in a way that was entirely physical. They moved through hidden passages and forgotten chambers, each place presenting visions of the past, memories twisted by the curse. Lucian saw his ancestors making choices that had bound the family for generations. He saw moments of love and betrayal, courage and fear. And through it all, he felt the pull of destiny, urging him forward. In one chamber, he saw his mother, young and radiant, speaking to a man whose face he did not recognize. Her voice carried urgency, almost desperation. "Marry him before her." Lucian felt a pang of anger and confusion. Why would his mother demand such a thing? What had she seen that he had not? "Ilara," he whispered, "why would she?" "You will understand," she said. "In time you must see beyond anger and fear. The curse is not just a punishment. It is a lesson, a path. You must follow it to understand your own heart." They continued through the castle, each room revealing more pieces of the puzzle. Lucian felt his mind grow heavy with visions, but his resolve strengthened. He could not let fear or doubt control him. The choice was his, and he would meet it with courage. At last they arrived at a room at the highest tower, overlooking the cliffs and the sea beyond. The windows were tall and arched, and the wind whipped through them, carrying the scent of salt and stone. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a small, intricately carved box. "This is the final part of the test," Ilara said. "Inside is the answer you seek, but be warned, the truth may not be what you expect." Lucian approached the box, his hands trembling slightly. He opened it. Inside was a mirror, small but perfectly formed. He looked into it and saw not just his own reflection, but glimpses of another, someone he had not yet met, someone whose fate was entwined with his own. A soft voice whispered in his ear, almost like the wind through the tower, "Choose wisely." Lucian felt a sudden surge of emotion, fear, longing, confusion, and hope, all at once. The visions in the mirror showed him paths he had not imagined, paths of love, sacrifice, courage, and loss. He realized that the curse was not simply about obedience, but about understanding himself, about seeing the truth in his own heart and the hearts of others. "Ilara," he said, turning to her, "I think I understand now. The choice, it is not about fear, it is about love, about knowing what matters and being brave enough to act on it." She nodded, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Yes. And once you make the choice, the path will reveal itself. But you must be ready for what comes next. The curse does not end here. It tests, it shapes, and it challenges. Only through courage and wisdom can it be broken." Lucian felt a weight lift from his chest, though the journey ahead was still uncertain. For the first time, he felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. The curse was not just a threat, it was a guide, showing him the path he must walk, the heart he must follow. He closed the box, feeling the power of the curse settle around him like a cloak. "I am ready," he said. "Whatever comes, I will face it." Ilara smiled, a soft, gentle expression that filled him with warmth. "Then let us prepare," she said. "The next stage begins soon. The choices you make will shape not just your future, but the fate of everyone you love." As they left the tower, the first light of dawn broke over the cliffs. The sea sparkled beneath the rising sun, and the castle seemed to glow in the soft morning light. Lucian felt a new determination, a sense of hope mingled with the weight of responsibility. The path would be difficult, the trials demanding, but he knew he was not alone. Yet even as the sun rose, casting gold over the stone walls, a shadow lingered at the edge of the castle. Somewhere in the distance, unseen eyes watched the Duke and his companion, waiting. The curse had many shapes, and not all were visible to those it touched. Lucian could not see the watcher, nor did he know their intent. But he felt it, a ripple of unease, a reminder that danger was never far. The choice he must make was approaching, and the threads of fate were already entwined around him and Ilara. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of the castle, the Queen Dowager smiled, her thoughts unreadable. The pieces were moving as she had planned, and soon the full game would begin. Lucian held Ilara's hand as they descended the tower stairs, their steps echoing in the silent halls. He felt fear, yes, but also determination. The curse was a path he could walk, a challenge he could meet, and with Ilara by his side, he believed he could face whatever came next. But deep in his heart, he knew one truth. The choice would not be simple, and the consequences would reach far beyond the walls of the castle. The curse had only begun, and the tests were far from over. The castle seemed quieter than ever, but Lucian knew that stillness was only an illusion. The corridors carried whispers that were barely audible, as if the walls themselves were speaking secrets meant only for him. The rose from the previous night rested on his table, its red petals beginning to fade, and the weight of the curse pressed against his chest like a stone. Ilara had stayed close through the night, her presence a quiet comfort. She had not slept either, choosing instead to guide Lucian in understanding the nature of the curse. Now, as dawn spilled pale light across the castle floors, they prepared to leave the familiar stone walls behind. The eastern lands, abandoned and wild, awaited them. Only there, Ilara said, could they uncover the first truth of the prophecy and test the courage that the curse demanded. Lucian tightened his cloak against the morning chill. "Are we truly ready for what waits there?" he asked, his voice low. The wind rattled the windows, carrying a scent of pine and damp earth. Ilara's dark eyes met his. "We must be," she said. "The curse does not forgive hesitation. It will not allow you to hide from your choices. If we wait too long, the consequences will grow." The journey beyond the castle walls was harder than Lucian had imagined. The path twisted through forests dense with gnarled trees and thick fog. Every step seemed uncertain, as though the land itself sought to test their resolve. Shadows shifted at the edges of their vision, sometimes forming the shapes of creatures he could not name, only to vanish when he looked directly. "You see them too, don't you?" he asked, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. Ilara nodded. "They are manifestations of the curse," she said. "Not all are harmful. Some are warnings, others are memories. You must learn to distinguish between the two, or the path will mislead you." As they walked, the wind carried whispers, echoes of voices long gone. Lucian heard faint cries of sorrow, laughter that was too bright to be real, and commands that sounded eerily like his mother's voice. The deeper into the forest they went, the more the air thickened with the scent of earth and decay, and Lucian began to feel the weight of generations pressing on him. At last, they reached a clearing. In its center stood a stone altar, covered in moss and etched with symbols that glowed faintly under the sunlight. The air was heavy with magic, and the silence was so complete it seemed to hum with energy. Lucian approached cautiously, his heart pounding. "This is the place," Ilara said. "Here, the curse will show you its first trial." A sudden chill ran through Lucian. The shadows of the forest seemed to gather around the clearing, pressing inward as though the trees themselves were watching. Then, before his eyes, the ground seemed to ripple, and a figure emerged. It was a man, tall and clad in dark robes that shimmered with an unnatural light. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his presence radiated authority and power. "You seek to defy the curse," the figure said, his voice deep and echoing. "Yet you know nothing of its true nature. Why should it spare you, young Duke?" Lucian straightened, his fear tempered by determination. "I seek to understand," he said. "I do not wish to harm anyone. I only wish to choose what is right and to protect those I care for." The figure laughed, a sound that was both harsh and hollow. "Noble words," he said, "but courage alone will not save you. The curse tests the heart, not just the mind. You must face what lies within yourself and the truths you wish to deny." Suddenly, the ground beneath Lucian's feet shifted. The forest disappeared, replaced by visions that surrounded him in a whirlwind of light and shadow. He saw himself as a child, alone in the castle corridors, searching for love and acceptance he had never fully received. He saw moments of fear, moments of pride, and moments of selfishness that he had tried to forget. "Ilara," he called, reaching for her, I do not understand." Her voice came to him, calm but insistent. "You must see, Lucian. The curse is not punishment, it is reflection. You must face the truth within yourself. Only then can you move forward." The visions shifted again. This time Lucian saw his mother, younger and radiant, speaking to a figure he recognized from stories, a man of noble bearing whose eyes held a sadness that mirrored his own. The words were clearer now, marry him before her. Lucian felt a sharp pain in his chest. He realized that the decision he was asked to make had nothing to do with fear or power. It was a choice of loyalty, of heart, and of understanding the sacrifices of those before him. He looked at Alara, who stood at the edge of the visions, her expression patient and steady. "I think I understand now," he said, his voice trembling. "The curse, it is not simply about obedience. It is about seeing the truth, about understanding love, responsibility, and sacrifice." The figure in the robes moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "And do you have the courage to act on that truth?" he asked. "To face the consequences of choice, even if they bring pain?" Lucian swallowed hard. He felt the weight of generations on his shoulders, the eyes of ancestors both proud and disappointed watching him. But he also felt something stronger, the pull of his own heart, the bond he had begun to form with Alara, and the determination to protect those he loved. "I do," he said, voice firm. "I will face whatever comes. I will act with courage and with love." The figure bowed slightly, as if acknowledging the truth in Lucian's words. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision vanished. The forest returned, the mist curling around their feet, and the clearing seemed ordinary once more. Alara approached, her hand brushing against his arm. "You have passed the first trial," she said softly. "But this is only the beginning. The curse is not easily broken, and there are forces at work that wish to see it fulfilled, not undone." Lucian nodded, though his mind was still reeling from the visions. "Then we must prepare," he said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Their journey continued through the wild lands, the path growing more treacherous with each step. They crossed rivers swollen with recent rains, climbed hills slick with mud, and navigated forests so dense that sunlight barely reached the ground. Each obstacle was a test, not only of skill and endurance, but of trust and patience. Lucian began to understand the subtle lessons the curse demanded: courage, wisdom, and the willingness to face not just the world but oneself. One evening, as they made camp beside a quiet stream, Lucian finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light on their faces. Alara sat across from him, her eyes thoughtful. "Lucian," she said quietly, "do you understand why the curse has chosen this path for you?" He shook his head. I think it is to teach me. To make me see what truly matters, but it is difficult. The visions, the truths, they are heavy, and I do not yet know who the her is or what my mother truly intended." Alara reached out, placing her hand over his. "The her will reveal herself in time." "And your mother, she acts from her own understanding, her own fears and hopes. Do not judge her yet. Focus on what you can control, the choices you make, the courage you show, and the love you nurture." Lucian looked at her, feeling warmth spread through his chest. There was comfort in her presence, a quiet strength that steadied him. He realized how much he had begun to rely on her, not just for guidance, but for companionship, for understanding, for something he had never allowed himself to feel before. As night fell, they lay beneath a canopy of stars, the sound of the forest surrounding them. Lucian felt the weight of the curse still pressing on him, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with tests and revelations, but he was not alone. And yet, even in the quiet, he felt a shadow linger. Somewhere in the forest, hidden eyes watched them, waiting for a moment of weakness. Lucian could not see the watcher, but he felt the unease prickling at the edge of his awareness. The curse was far from over, and the choices he would face were only growing more difficult. As he drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, he dreamed of the locket, the mirror, and the blood-red rose. A voice whispered again, soft and haunting, "Choose wisely, or all will be lost." Lucian awoke before dawn, the first light brushing the treetops. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Alara, and looked toward the horizon. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and tests he could not yet imagine. But he knew one truth: the curse had brought him here for a reason, and only by facing it with courage, wisdom, and heart could he hope to find the answers he sought. And somewhere, deep in the distance, the shadowy figure from the clearing watched, waiting for the next move. Lucian tightened his cloak, feeling both fear and determination. The fall had begun and the revelation was yet to come. But he would not falter, not with Alara by his side, and not when the fate of so many rested on his shoulders. The choice would come. And when it did, he would be ready. The castle of Evermore had never seemed so silent. Its ancient halls, which had once echoed with the sound of servants, horses, and courtly bustle, now felt hollow. Lucian moved through the corridors with steady steps, the memory of the curse pressing on his mind like a shadow he could not shake. The final test awaited him, and he knew there was no turning back. Alara walked beside him, her hand lightly brushing his sleeve, a small comfort against the fear that lingered in his heart. The mist of dawn clung to the stone walls, softening the edges of the castle and casting everything in an almost ethereal glow. The air smelled faintly of rain and wet earth, a reminder that even in darkness the world could be renewed. "You are ready," Alara said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "Whatever awaits, you have faced the first trials with courage. Now comes the final part. The truth and the choice that will decide everything." Lucian nodded, swallowing hard. His heart pounded in his chest, not with fear but with the weight of responsibility. The visions, the whispers, and the lessons of the curse had led him here. He understood now that this journey was about more than survival. It was about love, loyalty, and the courage to see the truth, even when it was painful. At the heart of the castle, the Queen Dowager waited. Her presence was as commanding as ever, though there was a faint weariness in her eyes. She had arranged the test herself, weaving shadows and magic to ensure that her son would face the full weight of the family's legacy. Lucian stepped forward, keeping his gaze steady. "Mother," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I am ready to face the truth." The Queen Dowager regarded him silently for a long moment. "Do you understand what this choice demands?" she asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. "Do you know what is at stake?" "I do," Lucian replied. "I understand that the curse tests not only obedience but courage, wisdom, and the heart. I will choose with understanding and I will act with love." Her eyes softened slightly, though the sternness remained. "Then come forward," she said. "Face the truth and claim your destiny." Lucian stepped closer, and the shadows in the room seemed to shift and ripple, forming shapes that danced around him. Figures from the past appeared, ancestors, servants, and strangers alike, each carrying whispers of judgment, sorrow, and hope. He saw moments of betrayal and courage, pride and regret, all intertwined with his family's history. "Alara," he whispered, I see it now. The curse is not punishment, it is guidance. It is meant to teach, to show, to prepare, and it is not meant to control the heart but to reveal it." Alara nodded, her dark eyes glimmering. "Yes, now you must act. The final choice is yours. Only by facing it fully can the curse be broken." A sudden gust of wind swept through the hall, extinguishing torches and leaving the room in semi-darkness. The Queen Dowager raised her hand, and the shadows formed a path, leading to a small pedestal. Upon it rested a golden mirror, its surface rippling as though alive. Lucian felt a strange pull, a call from the depths of the glass, drawing him forward. He approached the mirror, his reflection merging with visions of others, Alara, his mother, and a young woman he did not yet recognize. The image shifted, revealing a figure trapped in darkness, surrounded by shadows that threatened to consume her. Lucian's heart clenched. He knew instinctively that she was the her his mother had spoken of, the one whose fate was entwined with his own. "You must save her," a voice whispered, echoing through the hall. "Your choice will free or bind her." Lucian turned to the Queen Dowager. "Mother, who is she?" "She is someone of the family line," the Dowager said quietly, her voice almost lost in the echoing hall. "Her fate is tied to yours as mine once was. The curse has watched over her, protected her, and guided her. Only you can choose her path now. Lucian felt a surge of determination. The visions, the warnings, and the lessons had prepared him for this moment. He knew what he must do. He stepped forward and reached toward the mirror, his hand trembling slightly. The glass was cool beneath his fingers, and he felt a pulse, like a heartbeat, as if the woman within were alive. "Ilara," he said softly, "I understand now. The choice is not only about duty, it is about love and about courage. I will act with both." The mirror shimmered, and the shadows around the woman began to lift. Lucian felt a warmth spread through the room, a light that seemed to originate from his own heart. The darkness that had clung to the castle, to his family, and to the curse began to recede, drawn back by the strength of his resolve. The young woman stepped from the mirror, her presence radiant. She was beautiful not just in appearance but in the strength that shone from her eyes. She bowed slightly to Lucian, a gesture of trust and recognition. "You chose," she said softly. "You chose with courage, and the curse yields to the heart that is true." Lucian felt relief and awe. The shadows that had haunted him for so long began to dissolve, the echoes of whispers fading into silence. The curse, so heavy and oppressive, was no longer a burden. It had been broken, not through power or fear, but through understanding and love. The Queen Dowager watched silently, a faint smile touching her lips. "You have done well, Lucian," she said. "You have learned the lessons of our family, faced the trials of the curse, and acted with wisdom. Now you are free to shape your destiny." Lucian turned to Ilara, who stepped forward, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "We did it," he said softly, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "Together we faced it, and together we have overcome it." The castle, which had felt so dark and oppressive for so long, now seemed lighter, almost alive with the sense of renewal. The halls no longer whispered with shadows, but with echoes of hope. The wind outside carried the scent of rain and new beginnings, and the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light across the stone walls. Lucian felt a deep sense of peace. The curse that had haunted his family for generations was broken, and he had faced it not alone, but with Ilara by his side. The lessons of courage, wisdom, and heart had shaped him, tempered him, and prepared him for the future. As they walked through the castle together, Lucian reflected on all that had happened. The visions, the trials, the shadows, they had all been part of the path that led him to this moment. He understood now that the curse had not been a punishment, but a test of character, a way to teach him the strength and wisdom required to rule and to love. In the quiet of the hall, he stopped and looked at Ilara. "You have been with me through everything," he said, his voice soft but full of emotion. "I could not have faced this without you." Ilara smiled, her hand still in his. "And I will remain with you always," she said. "Not because of the curse, but because of what we have chosen together. We are free, Lucian, free to shape our own destiny." For a moment, they simply stood together, watching the sunlight stream through the tall windows. The castle seemed alive with possibility, and the world beyond the stone walls awaited them with promise. Lucian felt a sense of hope and courage that he had never known before. The shadows of the past had been faced, and the future was theirs to shape. Yet even as the light filled the halls, a faint breeze carried a whisper through the castle. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it carried a warning. The game is not over. Lucian felt a shiver, but it was different from the fear he had known before. Now it was a challenge, a reminder that life would always bring tests, but he was ready. He had learned to face the unknown, to act with courage, and to follow his heart. He turned to Ilara, and together they walked toward the castle gates. The sun bathed the cliffs and the sea beyond in golden light, and the waves crashed against the rocks with a steady, reassuring rhythm. They stepped into the world beyond, not as pawns of a curse, but as masters of their own fate. Lucian looked back once, to the castle that had shaped him, and then forward to the path ahead. He felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also the thrill of freedom. The choices he had made and the love he had found would guide him through whatever came next. Alara squeezed his hand and he returned the gesture with a firm, steady grip. "Together," he said. "Together," she echoed. The wind carried them forward and the horizon stretched wide with possibilities. The curse had ended, the shadows had lifted, and the dawn of choice had arrived. Lucian and Alara stepped into the world, ready to face it as equals, bound by courage, heart, and love. And somewhere, deep within the ancient walls of the castle, the Queen Dowager watched with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the family's legacy was secure, not through fear or force, but through understanding, wisdom, and the power of the heart. Lucian and Alara moved forward, leaving the shadows behind, ready to create a future shaped by their own choices, a future of hope, love, and courage. The storm had passed, the curse had ended, and the world awaited them, bright and full of promise.